I was a CID duty agent, the CID representative for the installation. And it was a 24-hour stint of operation. They were centered in the CID office. The equipment we had was communication equipment to keep in touch with the MPs and the police. Yes, we had a bunk there, a bed that we could use if it was a downtime with no calls coming in, or we could lay down and maybe catch not even 40 winks, but maybe 20. There's always something going on at Fort Bragg. I finished up all the regular admin work and paperwork, the shift, and I decided to lay down and take a nap. And while I was laying there, military police radio was on 24 hours, 24/7. And all the calls that come in would be monitored by the CID office in the event that they'd be needed out there for felony investigations. I lay down for a nap, and if I can explain this to you, when police have 24 hours operations and they have radios going, usually you don't react to every radio call, but there are some that you know by the tone of the individual who's really stressed out coming across the radio, or they would just call and say, "Hey, CID, come on down here." It gets to the point where you can leave your radio on and you get all sorts of radio calls coming through, and you automatically cut them out. No, this one, you could tell by the urgency of the transmitter's voice that there was something going on and you need to look into it. So that's why I got up and went over, and I heard them talking about something about a stabbing. So I got on the line and called them back, the people who were down at the scene, and asked if there were any fatal injuries involved. And they said yes. I said, I'll be en route. I'll be there as soon as I can get there. Then I had an assistant working with me, a military police investigator, Tony Rossi. Good guy, good investigator. We had worked all day together, and we had a good relationship going. I called him and I told him we got a fatal injury down here in the family quarters. I told him to pack up his crime scene kit and come on over. So he did, and we rolled off. It's a real short run. It was within 5 minutes we were at the house. No, not yet. Much too soon. You have to go in and assess the situation and see what you need. When I first rolled up, I saw an Army ambulance and a number of MP cars. I forget how many, maybe half a dozen. Tony and I got out of our car and we walked. It was kind of a rainy night. It wasn't raining at that particular time, but the ground was wet. And we walked up to the house, myself to the MP who was on security there. Then he let us in and he pointed out to the duty officer. It was Lieutenant Polk. And so I went directly to him and I asked him to give me a briefing on what they had found. And he told me that they were responding to a call. The resident who lived in the house was calling, asking for help, and he had been stabbed. And at this point, I was in the living room entryway, and straight ahead of me was a long corridor that went the length of the apartment. And I saw a gurney being wheeled down towards me by two medics. And I could see as it got closer, there was a man laying on the gurney. His eyes were closed. I assumed he was unconscious. When they wheeled him by me, the lieutenant said, "This is the resident of this set of quarters." And he took me then and walked me down the hallway. And walked to the end of as I was walking down the hallway, I could see a body laying on the floor of the bedroom. As I got down, I could see it was a female in pajamas. And he said, "Yeah, this is the wife of the man who just was wheeled out." And the close I could see that she was dead. And I turned to him and he said, "Well, that's not all." Words to that effect. "There's more down the hallway." And he walked me down the hall further and took me to two bedrooms and he had a flashlight he flashed in there. And I saw the bodies of 2 persons, one in each of the 2 side bedrooms. I was taken by surprise because I didn't expect 1 or 2. I didn't expect 3 people to be laying out. So we went back down into the living room, and at that point I discussed with the lieutenant we had to get rid of some of the MPs, put them on the road again, or put them on security around the house. And he did that right away. He placed them around the house to make sure nobody else would get in without going through our control point, which we had at the front door. It was not something you see every day, of course. After we did that, I started making telephone calls. I called my chief and told him what we had. And called for a photographer who was part of our office. He did his duty call from his home. So I got a hold of him and told him to get his stuff and come into the office and then get with the MPs and they'd take him down there. And he did. He showed up. And I told him that we had 3 bodies. We're going to have to start processing. I told him that he needed to start here, and generally what I wanted him to start photographing right away. He just starting on the first room, and I was looking at him, and he didn't look very well at all. And he came over and told me, he said, I'm going to be sick. So that alerted me, I got to get him out of this house. So we got him out of the house, and I called his boss, who was the post photographer, the chief of the photography branch, who I had known from previous cases. And I told him what happened with the first photographer, and I asked him if he could come on down. And he lived nearby, and I guess he did code 3 because he was within very few minutes he was there. And then I started him on what I wanted him to photograph. And he knew about crime scene photography. It was an easy task. I set him to work, and then I began telephone calls to other agents to get a full investigative team in there so we could process this whole house. And I started calling them, and within 15 minutes, I started getting the first responses. And as they came, they would assign tasks within the crime scene, and that's how we started the actual processing. And the master bed had a big wet spot on it, so I assumed somebody had wet the bed. And there was a pile of bedding down at the foot of the bed. There was what looked like a pocket from her pajama top, judging by the material. It was bloodied, but it wasn't drenched in blood like the rest of the shirt was. That's one of the things that stuck with me. And then I saw the knife that was laying underneath a dresser. And the headboard, there was the bloody imprint of the word pig, P-I-G, written. Looked like somebody would be leaning over the headboard and then reaching down to the back of the headboard and writing those letters, the P-I-G. Not right away, no. Yes, the next room I went to was the room on the north side. I looked in the door was ajar, and I looked in and I could see a light switch in there, and I did the old Dick Tracy trick and took my pen and so I wouldn't get fingerprints on it and flipped the switch. I could see another body was laying in the bed, and he said, there's one more over here. I said, oh, okay. So I went over there and did the same thing with my pen, and I saw what looked like a small child laying in the bed. The bed was completely covered in blood. She was obviously dead. It looked like the 2 children, I could say the 2 that I last looked at, the question again. It looked as if they had been killed and then positioned in the bed to look like they had died in their sleep. And that was the same with the both rooms. The first bedroom I went to was the older girl, I found out later, who was laying on her left side, and she was all tucked in with blankets. And her head was bloodied, and she was beaten severely. It looked like she also had been killed in her sleep and never woken up. And in the little girl's room, and she was positioned in the bed and on her left side. I think one of her legs was hanging over the side. And there was a lot of blood in there, blood in that room. There was a small baby bottle that was up laying next to her mouth looked like she had been attacked and died with that bottle in the mouth. Again, she looked like she had been killed in her sleep. About this time, I started getting feeder information from the hospital, from the agents that went there. Started putting together a picture of what we were seeing. He said it was happening. I guess he mentioned something to the military policeman who first encountered him laying on the floor. Sometime around this period, I started getting information back from some of the agents who had been to the hospital and who had interviewed MacDonald, or the resident of the police quarters. And the story that was coming out was that he was saying that he had been sleeping on the couch in the living room and was awakened by 4 intruders. One who was carrying a piece of wood about the size of a baseball bat. And they attacked him when he was laying on the couch. The person with the club started beating him with the club, so he said. He tried to fight his way up and fought his way over to the entrance to that hallway that led down to the end of the... He was knocked unconscious as he just reached the entrance of that hallway. At that point, he felt somebody who had what he thought was a knife in his hand. Someone who was with the knife or whatever it was punching him in his side. That's when he got up and made his way to the hallway where he was knocked unconscious. When he woke up, the intruders were gone. He went back into the back part of the house and found his wife and 2 daughters. Also, at the end of the hallway, there was a bundle of, it looked like a child's pajamas. Other things that we noticed in the living room, there was a coffee table that was upended, and there was some debris that was underneath the place where the thing had been overturned. There's nothing after. While standing at the foot of the hallway, I was looking out over the living room, and I noticed a coffee table laying up on its side. Obviously it had been caught up in some sort of struggle. And there were some miscellaneous items that we looked at later that were laying around the legs of that table that was upended. I wanted to be there when they moved the bodies, and when they came with the ambulances to remove them, I went back into the master bedroom and got down on my hands and knees, and I was looking to see what was under the body when they first moved it. And when they took it by the shoulders and the legs and lifted it up, I noticed under the head there was something was sticking out of what looked like a blood clot. So I left them alone and they took it out, the body up, and laid it on a gurney, and then wheeled it out of the house. And then I went and took a closer look at what I saw under her head, and I saw it look like a big thread. So I noted that my partner there, Bob Shaw, we knew we were going to take a closer look at it, and as soon as they cleared the rest of the bodies out. At about the same time, I started looking at the outline that Paul Connolly and I had drawn. That was hard to do because of the shag carpet, but we did a body outline. I started looking in that, and I kept seeing lots of little blue, what looked like threads that were underneath the body. So I, again, noted that to Bob, then figured then as soon as we got the chance, we'd go back and start collecting them. After watching them remove Colette's body, I went back to take a closer look at the bodies of the 2 children who were identified by the neighbor as Kimmy and Christy MacDonald. And as their bodies were lifted up, for instance, for Kimmy's body, that's the girl who was beaten badly on the side of her head. I saw some other similar looking threads, dark colored, had been laying underneath the bedding that had been tucked around her to make it look like she had been killed in her sleep. Also on that bed, down behind the pillow, one of the pillows, there was a large splinter with blood on it, I believe. And it was completely out of place, so we marked that for collection as well. Yeah, when I went to the little girl's room and started looking closer at it, noticed that the blood that was soaked on her clothes was in two basic units, one in the upper half of her torso and then the lower part, which was strange. Well, there was nothing to break it up. There was nothing lying between the body and the edge of the bed. So just to see it like that, it was very noticeable. She had this bottle of the baby bottle with looked like it had chocolate milk in it or something that was up near her head. And again, giving the impression that she had never woken. She had been killed in her sleep. Second, we didn't find pajama threads right then, I don't believe, no. We went back and later on, and some other agents were coming behind us, and basically the same search that we were doing. Figured they would, if they would find us something, they would let us know. It was a baby's rocking horse was in there, and just normal toys and stuff that you would see in a little girl's room. The CID chief and asked him to call, see if he could get somebody up there, and he did. And in fact, I think it was the CG, the commanding general of that post down there, let them use his plane, and so they flew up and back. When they arrived, we took them again, a quick tour through the crime scene. I'm trying to think who was the chief of that lab team. But at any rate, we asked them to farm out the different rooms to the people with their specialties. We had fingerprint, we had chemistry, we had all the specialties, photography, all of the lab specialties there. One of the things they were doing is going into the kitchen, and the chemistry guy was, I believe at that point, he dismantled the drain from the kitchen sink. And he brought to our attention, I think there was 6 or 7 blood drops that were in a circular pattern on the floor tiles. And we thought that was strange. It looked like there's some blood tailings from that was running towards the sink. And so we looked in the cabinet underneath the sink, and one of the things we found back in there was a box of Perry's surgical gloves. It would be important due to the fact that earlier, while doing the crime scene search in the master bedroom, I was looking through this bundle of sheets and bedspread. And when I was going through that, I found fragments of what looked like a surgeon's glove at one point, and going through it further, I found what looked like an entire finger section of a surgeon's glove, again, which we took as evidence. I know personally when I first became aware of that situation, it was about halfway through the first day, and I was joined in a meeting, and we were discussing what everybody else was finding. And there was a consensus then that what Captain MacDonald said happened in those quarters, then the hours, never happened. Yeah. We looked at such things as trace evidence we might find underneath the couch or around the coffee table, and we found that on the edge of the pages of an Esquire magazine that was underneath one of the legs, there was what looked like a bloody finger imprint with no ridge lines because it was on the edge of the pages. And the cover story for that magazine was something like Manson, Marvin is afraid because of the Tate LaBianca murders, which happened within months of the findings of their crime scene search, including the word pig that was written on the headboard was about the same as was written on the wall in the house. And Los Angeles, as I believe. No, in fact, I went with the fingerprint lab guy, and we actually got down on our hands and knees and was parting the strands in the carpet on the floor, looking for anything that would be there that would indicate a struggle or violence or anything, and couldn't find anything. One of the things that MacDonald was saying and telling us what occurred to him from his point of view was that he was struggling with these intruders. What they did is they ripped his pajama shirt up the middle from the seams, and when he awoke after he had been knocked unconscious, it was connected by cuffs only to his arms. And his shirt was completely bloodied from collision. Yeah. Yes, he had been edited with chest. There was a preponderance of the seam threads, or just threads, fabric threads, that looked like it would have matched his pajama shirt all over that bedroom, the master bedroom. We collected as many as we could find and sent them off to the lab. Their examination of them said that they were identical in color and in appearance, and were apparently at one time seam threads on that pajama shirt. Towards the end, we didn't want to do this too soon, but we decided we were going to try to reenact what he said happened there. And when we started that, we had to almost immediately stop because they had a china cabinet in the dining room which adjoined the living room. The contents of it were shaken so badly that if we had continued it, we had to stop it completely. We'd have china and crystal all over the floor. Yes, we were having a little business meeting in the chief's office, myself, Bob Shaw, and the chief of the CID office. And naturally that case was the main topic of the meetings. Then one of the people from the front of the office come back to us and said, "He's out front." And we went out to get him. MacDonald was out front. So we went out there, and sure he was there. What he was doing is trying to get into back into his apartment so we could get some personal belongings out of it. So we said, well, between the three of us, he's here, let's try it. And so we began to sit him down, give him his rights, then began an in-depth interview with him as to what he says occurred in that house that night. He almost practiced. He had given the story, I'm sure, to a lot of people. And he went back over the same story, basically, that he gave to the MPs. We started some interrogation techniques to poke some holes in his shirt in his story. I'm trying to think how he said it. We told him that he was suspected of being involved in the death of those children. And he said something like, "Oh, that's ominous." And we asked him if he would like to take a polygraph test. And he said yes, he would. So then this falls on us. We called down to our higher headquarters and got authority to get somebody to come up and to do him on the polygraph. And the chief of the polygraph section, who is a world-renowned expert on polygraphy, was contacted, and he said he'd be up there that day. He had problems getting some transportation up there, and so we knew we couldn't do it that day. He was released, MacDonald was released, and at that time he was living in some transit quarters, which is just down the street from the CID office. And just the time it would take him to walk from our office down to that billet, he changed his mind and he called back and said, "No, I'm not going to take a polygraph." So we just put it off to another day, and he never came back. We formed an investigative team, of which I was one of the parts. Witnesses, we searched out every imaginable story that we heard about the connection to the MacDonald murders. Again, in an attempt to find out what the story was, what actually happened there, everywhere. One of the tacks that we were taking was that we had heard that when he was down in San Antonio attending the medical officer's orientation course before he could be assigned to up at Fort Bragg, that He had some pretty heavy sexual relations with some stewardesses from American Airlines. So we went down to San Antonio and interviewed a lot of them there, and they gave us further leads and went looking and interviewing as many as we could find. And then he was a playboy. He was party boy. Yes, there was, I forget how it came up, but I don't know if it was in someone's testimony. The information that we were receiving was that he was having sexual relations with someone, I think, who was also living in the transit quarters where he was. He was supposed to be under house arrest. Jack Pruitt and Pete Kearns were heavily involved in that. And it got to the point where I think it was Freddie wanted to get the case turned over to the feds. They was told, I guess the only way that he could do that was to swear out a complaint against them. So he and Pete Kearns and Jack Pruitt put together some legal paperwork and brought it to a federal court judge. And the judge agreed that they needed to take jurisdiction on this case and see if it'll go to trial. And they did that. They brought it to him, and they went from there. During the trial, I had no contact with Joe McGinnis whatsoever. I knew he was there. I knew what he was doing, but I left that to Pete Kearns. I didn't meet him for quite a while afterwards. And I met him, and we hit it off. He signed my book for me, and we get along fine. Yes, Yes, just in general conversation. There was nothing specific. Yes, he was saying in general about how he got there and put all his faith in the MacDonald and Bernie Siegel. And then when he saw the stuff starting to turn, he said it turned quickly. Oh yeah, I like that. And it's probably the best source of information on the MacDonald trial that I've seen in print.